There were a lot of people that were very upset with the cancellation of the Batgirl movie that was almost completed, with a host of other endeavors regarding movies, streaming, and all that stuff by Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav. And it turns out we really haven't seen anything yet. They recently filed their financial statements for the third quarter, and Zaslav explained to their investors why he's doing what he's doing and what the future plans are for Warner Brothers Discovery regarding their content. Remember, David Zaslav really isn't a creative person. He's a businessman. He's a money guy, and he's seen a lot of the issues within Warner Brothers Discovery, and he is cleaning house, and we will not see the end of this probably for a couple of years. A lot of distressing things coming out in this investor call. We're going to talk about some of the numbers, some of their plans within the filing itself. Then I'll talk about the quotes from David Zaslav, what he had to say about it. And then finally, some of the things that we do know about the future and when we can see all these things happening. Warner Brothers Discovery recently made a filing with the SEC that shed some light on its third quarter 2022 performance and financials. The big standout is Warner Brothers Discovery is looking at impairment and development write-offs for more movies and TV shows in the $2 to $2.5 billion range. This is nothing new, as Zaslav's regime already axed the almost finished Batgirl movie, setting off a string of similar cuts that saw titles removed from HBO Max and broad programming changes across its various brands. It's also about chipping away at a massive $57 billion debt. And not for nothing, Warner Brothers Discovery lost $3.4 billion in its first quarter following the merger. $57 billion in debt is nothing to sneeze at. And then on top of that, the first quarter they had operationally after that, they lost another $3.4 billion. Pretty hard to pay off that debt when you're losing money hand over fist. The regime before David Zaslav at Warner Brothers, when it was part of AT&T, when it was called Warner Media, they were all in on streaming. They were spending so much money on HBO Max trying to make that a competitor for Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and it never really worked out. Their subscriber numbers are really minuscule, and those are kind of bumped up because there's a lot of people that get free access to HBO Max with their cellular plans or maybe with their cable plans and stuff like that, and they never even use them. They spent so much money, and it appears that all that money was wasted. Remember their strategy when they were releasing all their movies same day and date on HBO Max as well as the theatrical release? They ended up losing so much money because nobody went to theaters to see these movies. They probably didn't even go to HBO Max. At that point, they probably just pirated this stuff. And in a lot of cases, people that were interested in those products and consumed them might have spent $0 at all because Jason Kilar, who was head of HBO Max at the time, decided the best strategy was to release their theatrical movies at the exact same time and allow them to be pirated. Absolute insanity. You could see this failing from the day it happened. Obviously, we've seen a lot of changes since David Zaslav has taken over. They were spending tons of money on original content for HBO Max, not just shows and stuff like that. They were producing lots of movies. Obviously, the big one is Batgirl that got canceled. Even though principal photography was complete, they didn't have to spend a ton more money to finish that one up. They also did that with the Scooby movie and a few other things. There were other streaming platforms. Remember, they canceled CNN Plus like 1 month after launch because they could just see how much money they were going to lose just to try and get that thing up and competitive with other streaming news networks out there. A lot of people went out there and started disparaging David Zaslav and their plan. But once you see the numbers, there's really nothing else that he could do. Do you want to continue losing money when you have $57 billion in debt? You have to start making money. Yes, you got to consolidate. You got to finish the merger. You need to remove redundancies within the company. And I'm sure there were a lot of those, but there was also a lot of frivolous spending chasing subscriber numbers on HBO Max to the detriment to the entire company. Here are a few select quotes from David Zaslav on that investor call. Content is the heart of everything we do, and we are investing at historic levels, but it's no longer about how much, but how good. And ultimately, it is the consumer that tells us what's good. Very interesting stuff there. Another quote, one thing that doesn't work for us is spending $1 billion while collapsing a motion picture window into a streaming service. The movies that we launch into the theater do significantly better. Launching a 2-hour, an hour and 45-minute movie direct to streaming has done almost nothing for HBO Max in terms of viewership, retention, or love of the service. The final quote that I'll mention, we did not get rid of any shows that were helping us. We got rid of shows so that we could focus on producing new content that will. It's a business failure, but we'd rather take that money and spend it again and have a chance of having a show that will engage and delight on either our traditional platforms or our subscription platforms. I know a lot of people were very upset when they noticed some of their programs were missing from HBO Max. Well, apparently they did an audit. They did an accounting. They said, what are people watching? What are people enjoying? What is the value add to HBO Max? If you're adding nothing to the platform, why pay for the server space? Why even bother with that program that nobody's watching? Let's remove that and concentrate on the stuff that's working and get known for the really good content that we actually can provide. And what I thought was really interesting, David Zaslav is concentrating on quality over quantity and realizing that the customer is key. If people don't like what you're producing, you stop producing that and you go in a new direction. And it's quite apparent that David Zaslav and the people behind Warner Brothers Discovery saw what Batgirl was, and they said, you know what? Let's take a tax write-off. Let's get a little bit of money back rather than putting this out there and destroying the DCEU brand before we ever get a chance to really reinvigorate it and relaunch it into something that can possibly rival the MCU, which has been a promise and focal point for David Zaslav since day one. I think we are going to see a ton of DC-related programming in movies, streaming. I think they're going to go out there and license these characters out, and we're going to see DC Comics characters in more places than we ever have, but it's going to take a few years to get there. James Gunn and Peter Safran just took over as the heads of the new DC studio. They have to come up with a strategic plan, a vision of what they're going to do for the DCEU, the movies. Obviously, that's going to come first, but there's also streaming. We've heard the retooling the Green Lantern show. It appears the CW Arrowverse is pretty much dead at this point, but there are a lot of things percolating around DC characters these days. We've also got Matt Reeves' Batman universe. We got the movie. Sounds like the sequel has been greenlit, but we're also going to get a spin-off Penguin TV show, and I think we're also going to get a Gotham TV show along with that. You've got the Joker movie with its sequel coming out. I wouldn't be surprised if they did something that ties into that on HBO Max. And then you have some more traditional stuff, hopefully tying into even more DC characters, kind of like with what we have with Doom Patrol, which is very high quality. We got one season of Swamp Thing that was really good. So while we are going to see a tremendous amount of pain because they are going to be writing off so much stuff, they're going to be taking things that are almost complete, getting tax write-offs, and just bearing it. Batgirl is not special. It was just the first one it happened to, or at least the first one that really made news. They are going to do this to a lot of programming, get this straight, before they can really go out there and start rivaling not just the MCU, but Disney Plus and Netflix as well. As it stands, there's no word on what movies or shows are going to be impacted by these cost-saving measures. Ultimately, Warner Brothers Discovery is looking to take write-downs that will help them with net income on the balance sheet and tax liability. It means the projects that people worked hard on and that viewers were looking forward to are going to be let go. In some cases, like with Batman Caped Crusader, these projects will be allowed to find a new home. The really disconcerting thing is that this period of turmoil is far from over. As part of the SEC filing, Warner Brothers Discovery revealed that they expect these restructuring initiatives to be largely completed by the end of 2024. This is far from over, folks. We've got at least 2 more years of these kind of cuts, reorganizations to happen within Warner Brothers Discovery. I think we all knew behind the scenes, yes, there were going to be lots of layoffs. There was going to be a lot of restructuring, but I don't think anyone really could have foreseen that they were going to just start taking all these projects, nearly completed, probably a lot of them, and just canning them all just for insurance purposes, just so they can get a little bit of money back and fix the status quo of what they're going to be doing in movies, streaming, and traditional television. David Zaslav has a plan, and a lot of people have called him racist just for canceling Batgirl. Even DC Comics employees have said that. I said at the time that it was very unfair, and it was cherry-picking a few headlines here and there, but not looking at the whole situation in totality. David Zaslav is a businessman. I explained this all right here. If you haven't seen this, I made this video directly for you, talking about all the change, kind of foreshadowing what we're seeing now. If you can't see this video here, there's also a link in the video description.